it's also been a thread in our history, as everyone knows all too well, and something that each and every time you hope is the last time that we see it. But for me, going around the world and talking to people about this, I think the greatest strength that we bring to a crisis of this kind, to an attack on our democracy at home, even to the divisions that we have at home, which are real, which are profound, is the way we approach them, is what we actually do in response. And the hallmark of this country, heretofore, has always been to confront our challenges, to confront our differences, openly, transparently, not to pretend they don't exist, not to sweep them under the rug, but to engage them, even when it's ugly, even when it's incredibly painful. And that's something that continues to set us apart. Most other countries don't actually do that. So I believe strongly that as long as we continue to do that, including in the wake of something as horrific as what happened a week ago, actually, it's a demonstration of the resilience of our democracy, the resilience of our values, and the importance of openness, of transparency, of a willingness to confront our own demons, our own problems.
But is that the way the... Thank you. Yes. Is that the way the foreign leaders you're interacting with see it? I'm imagining you must get some pretty tough questions about things like an attempted assassination, the apparent inability of our Secret Service to prevent that attempt, a sense that things are out of control in the U.S. I mean, that must have some impact on America's ability to lead and wield influence on all kinds of things.
Again, I really think it's all in the response, and that's an ongoing matter. Let's see where the facts take us. Let's make sure we understand exactly what happened. Let's see what we do in response to that. And let's focus on the way that we do it. If we can continue to do this together, as has been the case in the past, even with the arguments, even with the divisions. Look, every single time up to now, even when we've had these terrible moments in our history, we have managed to emerge on the other side, and usually stronger and better off. Now, it's no guarantee for the future, but again, I feel strongly, as long as we continue to confront these challenges directly, openly, transparently, we'll get through them.
A question that I put to Bill Burns on this stage last year that I want to put to you. What should we be focused on that we are not? I've just asked you about the Middle East and Russia and Ukraine, and is there a place, an issue, a country, a person that journalists should ask you about, and we don't?
Well, you know, if I gave you an answer to that question, that would mean that I'm sort of tipping you off to a real problem we have that we don't want to talk about because the answer is too complicated, and then I get myself in trouble.
Go ahead and tip us off.
But nonetheless, no, I think, look, most of the challenges are readily apparent, and there's some places that are not getting the attention that they probably deserve because there's only so much that people can digest. Sudan right now is probably the worst humanitarian crisis in the world, and yet it's not getting the attention it deserves. It is from our administration. We're intensely focused on it. More to come in the days and weeks ahead. But the just in the last 3 years, we've worked hard to reorganize my own department, the State Department, to make sure that it was actually fit for purpose for the world that we're living in now, not the world that the State Department was dealing with for the previous 50 years. We stood up a new Bureau on Global Health to make sure that we're prepared and working to prevent and, as necessary, deal with the next pandemic. We stood up a Bureau on Cyber Policy, digital policy, emerging technology, to make sure that the United States is at the forefront in helping to define, to shape the rules, the norms, the standards by which all of this technology is going to be used. We've stood up a China House. We have something called the Global Engagement Center, which is focused on a front in the current great power competition that is maybe the most intense, one of the most important, but of course is something that doesn't get the focus that it might deserve from all of us, and that's the information front.
Yeah.
To make sure that we're effectively, as best we can, dealing with misinformation, dealing with disinformation. We now have agreements with nearly 20 countries to work collaboratively on doing just that. And then we have to look at what the world's going to look like going forward. We're heading over the next 20 or 30 years for peak population, and we're going to see declining populations around the world. Our basic model of economic growth is in jeopardy because we're going to have fewer productive workers, we're going to have an older population, we're going to have fewer people being able to produce things in our factories, fewer people able to buy things. Now, it may be that all of the extraordinary technology that's coming forward will lead to extraordinary increases in productivity and be able to overcome that, but we have an emerging gap, a gap that's growing wider between the number of people who are coming on to employment age around the world and the number of jobs that are available for those people. These are the kinds of things that we have to be very, very mindful of. And I'll give you one other example. If you're looking at how governments are responding to aging populations in so many of our democracies, understandably, they're doing what any democratic country would do, and even non-democratic countries. They're devoting resources to that population, that segment of the population. It means they're taking resources away from younger generations. And younger generations in that way are losing political power relative to older generations. And to the extent they believe that working through the democratic process, they will not be able to achieve what they want in trying to provide support, help for their lives, for their futures, they may start to look at doing other things. This is where populism becomes incredibly appealing. This is something that we have to be very cognizant about around the world. Speaking
of the younger generation, last question. We have a terrific program here, Rising Leaders. These are,
I met with the group yesterday. Yes. By the way, when I met with them, I said, if you're rising leaders, I guess that makes me a descending leader.
You may have shared this with them. If so, share it with the rest of us. Hit us with your best piece of advice. What do you wish 25-year-old Tony Blinken had known? I guess maybe my best piece of advice, I don't know if it's best piece of advice, but certainly what I'd share is this. As I've had the great privilege and fortune of being able to go around the world these last 3.5 years on behalf of the United States, and as we've confronted so many challenges, and as an American citizen, as I look at our own country, I think that the most potent poison in our common well is dehumanization, the inability to see the humanity in someone else. And when that sets in, everything good becomes so much harder, everything bad becomes so much more possible. So my biggest piece of advice to anyone who's engaged in public policy, anyone who's engaged in a debate about any policy, is focus on the humanity of the person on the other side of the table. Understand where they're coming from, what they're all about, what their aspirations are. Recognize how much we actually have in common underneath all of these differences. If we put the focus there, if we end or minimize the terrible dehumanization that we see in so many places around the world, then I'm more than convinced, I know that
the best of humanity is not only possible, it's what will happen. If we fail, if we don't do that, then what is a very dangerous world is going to get a lot more dangerous. And what is divided societies in so many places will become even more divided. And that will be a loss for everyone. But I've seen these bridges being built in so many places that I go to. I've met so many people who are doing that every single day, that are people who are finding the humanity in the other. So to me, that's our most important challenge.
Thank you. I want to thank Aspen. I want to thank Aspen for giving us a forum for these questions. And I want to thank you, Secretary Blinken, for fielding them.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And enjoy your... You can't get out of here on a flight.